Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to another live stream of Shadowverse. Today is Monday, January 11th. Let's get into it. I kind of have the feeling we're going to have an update when I click here. It kind of feels like it should have an update, but I guess not. We are past the crossover pretty much. Like, Grand Blue Fantasy still exists, but I think that is pretty much true always with any expansion or crossover with leader skins, that you can buy those with real world money at any point. Geez, I guess I don't really have too much to say as far as an accountability section today. I'm trying to think, and it's like, I've been doing the right thing. I've been a good boy, as it were, and playing Fear 2 after spotlighting the DLC standalone expansions of Fear 1 and deciding that I just did not want to really spend the energy doing those. So we're still here. I really should only buy like one pack, like, because we need to get up to 5,000, and I bought like 10 packs at, I think, a couple streams ago, and that was irresponsibly too many. There is a problem, certainly, with the numbers if you run them, in that every expansion we've been through since starting to play this game, I've had about enough for 50 packs. So to get to 400 packs, you're basically saying 4 expansions before I would get to the tradables point. And if that's the case, then, well, that doesn't really work, because then just about the time that I'd have tradables unlocked for Fortune's Hand will be the point in which none of the cards that I've collected would be really worth anything. There's not a lot to say about Fear 2. It is just constantly reiterating its own flaws, in that it is trying to be a militaristic first-person shooter game most of the time, 60-70% of the time, with a small 30% of it trying to be a horror game, which is fairly inconsistent. The idea that was thrown out there, and I don't know how much seriousness I should give it, is that Alma, the main spooky bad guy of the Fear series, is supposed to be like the mother of the apocalypse. If you take that literally, should I reroll anything here? Probably not. Let's just start playing Forestcraft. If we're not even getting treasure chests, this is such... feels like something should be going on at the moment with the expansion. That there should be some kind of event. Always. Destiny's Child, the Lude's gacha game that I play on my cell phone, it is incredibly great about that, where there's probably never any downtime, although it does seem like today, for some reason, there is some downtime, so I'm wrong about that. But they give you maybe 2-3 days of downtime, and then you jump back into the next event. Now, that might also be because Destiny Child Global, which is the version I'm playing, is trying to catch up with Destiny Child Japan and Destiny Child its original Korean version. So there could certainly be a point where systems and events stop happening because of it finally being caught up. Which, if that was the case, that wouldn't be super annoying, but it'd be slightly disappointing. The same is true, I guess, for... no, the same is not true for Shadowverse. Shadowverse is putting out all of its content at the same time, with the slight exception of the English translation being delayed. But yeah, Fear 2, it's working moderately well. The mouse controls and sensitivity, trying to use joy to key the map to controller support, is still a little bit of a problem. But there's frankly not a lot of scenarios where you won't just win no matter what anyways. So you're fairly well suited to succeed. Okay, so if I hit that, and then hit that, and that. And then hit that. But yeah, it had Alma. I'm starting and stopping here. The biggest thing to say about the accountability section today is I've certainly gotten back to the split sleep schedule, and it's as annoying as always, where I am just totally not thinking straight, or as straight as I would like to be thinking. And so yeah, I'm starting and stopping and having more than a fair share of mental pauses. I'm not doing that with Fear 3, but the reason I'm not doing that in Fear 2 is because I'm only playing when I'm really feeling up to it. But yeah, I am only getting 1, maybe 2 hours or 2 episodes, and the episode length of some of the levels are fairly short. It's gone from 30 minutes in one episode to 50 minutes in another. So there's a problem there. If I can keep the thought in my head, though, the idea of an apocalypse happening, Alma being the person who started the apocalypse, but not particularly the person who is going to have to always be the bad guy. She could just exist as a force of nature, I think is more interesting. It lets them create a scenario where the Fear series by itself does not have to be always set in the exact same chain of events, because the timelines between Fear 1 and Fear 2 directly overlap, and it's all in the exact same city. It's all the exact same evil Umbrella Corp type corporation, with the exception that, unlike Umbrella Corp and Resident Evil, they're not creating unique monsters, really. We see a good Alma and a young Alma who's supposed to, I guess, represent the good part of Alma, maybe. And then we see a older, naked adult Alma, who's, I suppose, supposed to represent the evil part of her. There is, having now seen Stranger Things many years later, certainly that wouldn't have come out during the time of Fear, but it kind of feels like Alma was in this sensory deprivation tank for many years, and she may have opened up a portal to another dimension where there was a Cthulhu-esque monster. Fear 2 makes it seem like that, because you definitely see these Cthulhu-esque tentacles, and yeah, in retrospect, having seen Stranger Things, that makes Alma feel like she's more of a victim instead of um, a bad guy, which inherently in a lot of horror movies you have to work really hard to avoid that. Otherwise, you're going to have a problem. Uh, Freddy Krueger is like a child molester that they later in later movies prove as his actual child molester, and the parents were right to rise up and burn him in the furnace. In the first movie, it's only hinted that they're right. So we're now going to play Bloodcraft and Portalcraft. Whereas, like, Jason Voorhees is left more as uh, a crazy, like, deformed character. At least in the first couple of movies, they change it. Or you often will have the characters just be straight up crazy and unreasonable and murderous. That works too. And so, even if they were going to make the idea that Alma was crazy and unreasonable and murderous, then that's kind of the weakest way to write a character like that. And you probably don't want to put a female as the bad guy. If you look honestly at the history of all of the bad guys in all kinds of horror movies and TV series, has there been a single female murderer that really, really works? Not in any long running series. I'm thinking like there is I guess there is just this underlining desire to go raw female empowerment that making them the bad guy doesn't really work in most directors' minds. I think like single white female, which I guess you could call a horror movie, has a crazy woman, and that's really where it is just going to boil down to. It's not going to be a supernatural magical evil force. It's just going to be a crazy woman. There's a couple of other movies in like the 80s with some crazy women that stalk and kill men, but that's it really. There's some Cenobites certainly that are female, but they are always given second fiddle to Pinhead. It would have made a lot of sense for the Wishmaster series to have a female Jinn show up. What else could even begin to go down that path? Like the clown from It could have been female easily, since it's a monster anyways. Frankly, any monster that just takes the form of a human could have been female, and it just doesn't happen. And it's probably just an underlying sexist instinct built into most of all societies. Whether it's fair or not, it seems like it is the case that you can't make a female Freddy Krueger and do the same thing, or they failed to do that. Maybe inherently it has more to do with the sexism in Hollywood, in the fact that there are very, very few lead roles for females, particularly in the 80s and 70s when these horror movies would have happened. So yeah, that kind of makes some sense too. So perhaps Fear was trying to be a little bit groundbreaking by having a spooky female character. Of course, I'm ignoring the obvious here of The Grudge, creepy Japanese girls on The Grudge, and there, I suppose, were female bad guys in the Curse of Blind manner, and female ghosts in other movies where there's a lot of ghosts. So the screen gets somewhat split between multiple people. But yeah, as far as like slasher movies, we don't have any of that. And I would say Fear probably is closer to a slasher movie. There is also a problem that they just don't give Alma any dialogue. She might whisper something creepy once in a while, but she's not having conversations. So any of the backstory in Fear, you have to pick up the books effectively and read the books that are hidden around the levels. And since I'm not doing that, I'm not getting any kind of story at all. And there's definitely not anywhere as much downtime in Fear that having books makes sense. It would certainly make more sense in something like Witcher or Skyrim, because in Witcher or Skyrim, there are good 10-20 minute chunks where you're just wandering around an area looking at everything that's been staged in a certain cave or a certain area, and then you will occasionally get the same repetitive skeleton to attack you, which Skyrim shares that with Fear, in the fact that it really is just the same two character models of soldiers that you're fighting over and over again, with an occasional unique enemy. But even the unique enemies that they've introduced have failed to really have any kind of lasting power. Like, they introduced creepy doctor zombie characters that could crawl on the roof and attack you. Well, once you get outside of the hospital facility, they are just gone forever. Or it would have made a lot more sense for them to find their way to the surface, but then they probably could not program the surfaces around that area for them to attack. So then you're just back to soldiers. So it's like chapter 1 soldiers, chapter 2 soldiers, chapter 3 half soldiers, then some creepy doctors, chapter 4 soldiers. Maybe you find something different. Where if Alma had just released the Apocalypse, it would have been a lot better. Would have cost more in animation budget if chapter 1 was soldiers, chapter 2 was creepy zombie soldiers, chapter 3 was creepy doctors, chapter 4 was something completely different, or you start mixing and matching, or you bring back stronger versions of soldiers. There is definitely problems with the balance anyways, because the way the game is balanced, at least on normal mode, you have three health kits and 4 guns that can hold whatever their maximum capacity of bullets are. Seemingly, you don't get major upgrades as far as bullet capacities. It creates this upper limit as far as how bullet spongy the enemies can be, and while it creates that upper limit, it doesn't really consider the bottom limit there. So there is no enemy in the game that you can reasonably shoot with one gun and destroy in one shot. You can certainly get a rocket launcher, which has probably less than 10 bullets in the entire game, maybe 20, and one shot a low-level soldier with the rocket launcher if you wanted to. But then the bullets run out, and then when you do need the rocket launcher when you're fighting giant armor mechs, which show up on 2 or 3 scripted places, and there is one scripted place I just played where you get inside a mech, and thus you're running around the entirety of the level shooting people with infinite bullets and not picking up any pickups as far as extra armor or health. It's just it was a good movement of the level, though, because it would have just been more of the same otherwise. So I can't hate the mech part. I have suspected the mech part because it is the level through blurry like LCD type screens, that perhaps in that level they had not visually polished it as much, or they were really pushing the number of polygons they could put on screen at the time, which is completely unimpressive 12 years later. But yeah, it's hard to have much to say. It's not like Fear 2 is a game that inspires complete frustration. What would have inspired complete frustration is if I had to play it with a mouse and keyboard, instead of mapping it using Joy-2 key. That would have been kind of sucky, and that could have led to a rage quit. It could also be too difficult. There have been a few places where you take a lot of damage, while the enemies you fight are bullet sponges and typically take 2 or 3 shots with an assault rifle, which has completely eliminated the ability to use the submachine gun. That thing takes like 20 or 30 shots to kill even a low level character now.
Seems to be over.
So there's a lack of balance, and there's really no reason why you can't hold on to more than 4 guns, because that would have also been nice. But it is a very early weapon wheel where instead of it being a weapon wheel, it is 4 guns up and down and 4 grenades left and right. The grenades desperately need to be upgraded. They don't have a high enough blast radius or high enough damage, so very often you'll throw it and it will not kill the person near you. Also, that might have a lot to do with the fact that you're supposed to prime the grenades, and it might very well have to do with the fact that the people are running around grabbing the grenades you throw and disarming them. Which, like, while that may be accurate to how grenades work, it's not really what you want to see happen. Like, you don't want to have your grenades become completely useless. Even if they were going to make them completely useless as anything other than a distractor that causes a lot of the enemies to run away from the grenades so they won't get hurt or run towards them to pick them up, which they may be doing there. I'm almost never looking that closely at the characters, at the bad guys, to see if that's what they're doing. I don't think it's been animated particularly well if that was the case. At a certain level, you almost need your silent protagonist to talk to himself instead of having the AI characters talk to each other. Because had the silent protagonist you're playing as said, shoot, he picked up my grenade, or even if you had programmed them to say, I picked up his grenade, or grenade disarmed, that would be helpful. The whole idea of the AI talking to each other is really not important. Like, it really is just an unimportant element that I'm sure they were super proud of, but really does not work. And you can certainly see that in that there have been no other first-person shooting games that have heavily advertised themselves on the fact that the characters talk to each other, the enemies talk to each other. If anything, I think Monolith had a big stick up their butt thinking that it was amazing that their AI was so good, and in reality, I don't know if people cared. Let's see. But yeah, there's, even though I've stretched it out quite a bit there, there's very little to talk about Fear, and that'll be probably the case all the way to the end. And I'll do the main story, and then I'll probably do the DLC, and then I'll give it 6 months to a year, and then I'll do Fear 3. You can definitely feel how Condemned Criminal Origin came about from Fear, how they took the general concept of the horror aspects and took out the first person shooting, and they took what they learned from the Fear series and made an actual good horror game, which is what is sorely lacking in this experience. Is the right, well, how do we want to do this?
Coming at you.
If you're my master, cleansing mode.
There we go. Kill that and that. Because I've mostly been doing that or sleeping, though, I have not been following the news greatly. Instead, what I've been doing is taking the weekend to mostly catch up on Amazon Prime and Netflix stuff. I've been looking at Amazon Prime, and it's a weird scenario, certainly, to say the least, because you have less of a selection by far compared to Netflix, but you have more of a Western selection of old movies and perhaps even interesting good movies, where Netflix is heavy into the Korean films and just foreign films and foreign TV shows. At least that's how my Netflix has gotten curated. There's probably a better selection of anime on Netflix if you're looking for a selection, but worse quality if you're actually looking for like a quality experience. So, yeah, if you really wanted to sit down and watch an anime, you might be better off with a Prime subscription. Honestly, you're probably not well off as far as anime in either factors. But I also, on TV, they managed to watch the Captain Marvel movie and Marvel Endgame backwards there. I will say, I feel like if you are on the fence as far as you've heard a lot of people didn't like Captain Marvel, I will say from my take of it, she is completely unnecessary and unimportant in Endgame. But in her own movie, she is fine. There was only one slightly cringy part in the Captain Marvel movie, and otherwise it feels very much just like all the other Marvel movies, which is to say good, but not usually great. There's arguably, I think, more to irritate people who have known the series, the comic book series in Captain Marvel, than there is to irritate regular fans because of how they handled the Kroll and the Scree, but those are not characters in the cinematic universe that are gonna really play any part. So yeah, I'd say I'd check it out. And then with Endgame Part 2 in particular, the truth of the matter there is that they needed to cut a lot of characters out. particularly in the final fight scene. Had they just not brought back anybody for that final fight scene, that would have been helpful. That way it was Avengers Endgame instead of it really not being Avengers Endgame and instead being all of Marvel Endgame. I watched some other movies. I watched a lot of horror things. But I don't think that there's really too much to even talk about. Let's see. This.
Magic guns can be kind of finicky.
But I guess that is the long way of saying that I didn't follow a lot of video game news over the weekend. Not that I think too much video game news has happened. Plenty of other news has happened and is still happening, certainly, but it's not video game related. I think we've mostly completely stopped around this. I did nearly comment on somebody's Facebook post, but decided to instead just post it myself as far as the obviously coordinated through payment processes and big tech efforts to censor certain people, that this is certainly a great time, and I'll repeat this. This is a great time to once again not ring the bell of cheer for big tech companies for doing what I almost certainly will agree is the right thing, which is stopping the incitement to violence, which has never been in the general concept of free speech, the thing that supersedes the Constitution, because the concept of free speech that all free speech advocates should be pushing for is like as old as the Magna Carta or older. It is certainly a growing, perhaps living concept, and not just something that's in the Constitution that only applies to people that have free speech listed in the Constitution of their countries, which that's really where people drop the ball and repeat the same thing as, oh, it's a private company, they can do whatever they want. Well, we are dangerously close to the point where private companies have so much power that they are the new governments, and governments can't even control them. And this is pointed out very specifically in the fact that in the United States specifically, there has been crony, corrupt capitalism to the point where the post office has been specifically disallowed to offer any kind of service to compete against email, social media, UPS, FedEx, things like that. They kind of have offerings like that, but they are always so restricted that they can't really compete. Not that they should have, not even saying that it should be publicized and that there should only be the post office and things like UPS and FedEx shouldn't exist. It's just they've been told they can't compete. It would be incredibly nice, and I'm not going to get into a big rant here, but just think about it for a second. It would be incredibly helpful and nice if the post office offered an email service, and did from day one that email existed. How many of billions, probably trillions of emails have gone through a Gmail account where Google has directly told you, yes, we're scanning all your emails, we're looking at all of them, we're having an AI determine your advertisement preferences, we're building a profile on you, and that profile is following you wherever you go on the internet with any of our partner companies, so that we can put more manipulative ads in front of your face. Like trillions upon trillions of emails have led to that. the internet sucks the way it sucks right now, where it is full of ads, because in part, in a small part, but in part, the post office was disallowed from offering email. In all fairness, if you had a government email, maybe you wouldn't want to use it. That's totally reasonable. Maybe the government email says, yes, we're also scanning your email, but we're only scanning for like terrorism reasons, which in all fairness, then that would just mean that they're scanning all your emails. At the very least, though, they very well may already be doing that. So I wouldn't be surprised one bit if the NSA is actually spying on everyone's email at every single domain from every email company, while still not giving any protection whatsoever to the consumers of the email, the citizens. If that was the case, though, at least we could address it. At least the post office email theoretically would require a subpoena before somebody looked at it. It would be protected by law and a judge and somebody that you would hope would have common sense. We've seen slight movement in that direction, at least, where people have come back and said, no, actually the NSA has just been spying on these projects, using these projects to spy on people, and we know it's wrong, and we're powerless to control our own government agencies, but at least we got that information out. Whereas when the only time we get any hint of the almost certain nefarious actions that have occurred around Gmail, it's because a whistleblower leaks the information, or a hacker hacks the information out. And certainly it would make more sense now that we see social media is banning certain people. It would be ideal that there is at least one social media site that requires a subpoena before somebody gets banned from it. Like, nothing really stops a judge's order from banning individuals from using certain social medias. That is often a limitation of parole that has happened in the past. Maybe they're getting away from that a little bit, but it's not unheard of for a judge to say that while you're on parole, you can't use electronic communication. That's still something that's brought into the court of law, and the only protection an average citizen has at all is laws, as bad as or poorly enforced as they may be, whereas citizens have no protection whatsoever when dealing with private companies. And why do we have no protection? It's because we have no, in the United States, there's very, very few rights that you cannot require somebody to sign away. So the idea of having moral rights or rights you can't give away is very limited in the United States, and so you can just be forced to sign a contract to live a normal life that everyone else is living, that says a corporation can do whatever it wants. And that's not right. It's not right that there's, at the very least, not a option there. So yeah, the post office should offer a social media site, and arguably an email service. Definitely an email service. Think of all the junk mail that could have just been scanned and sent to an email address instead of sent out as paper. Think of how much money the post office could have made for themselves and the government had they offered something like that. Think of all the small businesses that say, well, I can't print out flyers and mail those to every household in our market in bulk. That's too expensive. But I could certainly pay a penny an email for all of the email addresses in a certain area. It also gives a default email address to every student, every kid in any public school. No longer does each individual school district have to have their own separate email address that they have to maintain and hope is right. And it definitely would then, by putting it on a federal level, take away the aspect of multiple people potentially spying on emails, which we've heard that story too, where emails are given to usually not college kids but like high school kids, and then somebody is spying on the kids that shouldn't be, whether it's an IT person or it's a teacher in that school, or just that the security is really terrible. Of course, I guess at the end of the day, that is the public option, the Medicare for all option. It's the same thing in almost every single genre. Like, if we had an internet service provider that the post office was offering, or some other government agency was offering something that competed against internet, that would be great. Like, more competition, according to the religious doctrine that I don't really believe in of capitalism. More competition is good. So why is the government consistently being told and forced to not compete? Like, even admitting that their offering would probably be lacking in some way. Like, I wouldn't be surprised one bit if the post office, for instance, offered internet, it was incredibly slow internet, and it was spread out in such a way that it was constantly trying to give internet to people in the far outskirts of the country, and not really focused much on people inside the town. But heck, even a 1 megabit up, and heck, even a 56K up and a 56K down internet for free, because your taxes pay for it, would be better than what a lot of people have, where they just don't have any internet connection at all.
Let hope shine on. How about we have some fun?
So yeah, that was kind of ranty, but not too ranty. Like, I'm full. I will wrap it up just to say, sure, at the current moment, the way the laws are written, I think the laws should be changed. But at the current moment, corporations can do whatever they want, and certainly it's worth reiterating that free speech never included the ability to incite violence. But that the fact that there's no other option is a failure of government, it's a failure of capitalism, and it's a failure that has been manufactured intentionally by corporations. The same corporations that people want to laud now and applaud now. And that is not the right response. This is, once again, one of those scenarios where people are being tricked into celebrating their oppressors in a lot of ways, and being marched directly into their fire. And I suppose it is worth pointing out that the idea that Parler as a corporation is not allowed, is being attacked by other corporations, completely flies in the face of the idea that all corporations should be allowed to do whatever they want, because that's just not the case when you have payment processors in bulk, in unison, blocking Parler, and when you have Amazon servers blocking Parler, which I've heard the speculation is that that is just going to directly lead to Parler using Russian servers, which, yeah, I guess then you get what you get at that point. But in Parler's case, that's an entire site being taken down and attacked as if that was the only people that were using Parler. I don't know if that was the only people that were using Parler or not, because I never used Parler, but certainly it was something I'd heard about and something I was keeping my eye out as a potential replacement for other services. And so my options as a consumer have been eliminated through corporate espionage and the blame game and corporations trying to control the narrative. And that's not good for consumers, for sure. In all actuality, if you look at vote.co, like vote.co was supposed to be the site that was going to be the replacement to Reddit because people were upset with Reddit. I tried to follow it for 2 or 3 weeks and there was just so much spam and so much just hate that was pouring over into every single subgroup that it, in its own actions and its own design of not moderating, made itself completely uninteresting to the vast majority of people who weren't fully engaged in that kind of hate. So vote.co, I barely spent maybe a month or two trying to check on it and could never find an enjoyable experience with it. I imagine had I gone to Parler that very possibly would have been the exact same scenario. Because Parler was claiming to be a free speech, no censorship app, and anytime something claims to be a free speech, no censorship app, it either has to immediately back down, like Vote.co actually did, and started censoring things somewhat, or it gets attacked, which is frankly also an admission that places like Twitter and Facebook know they cannot succeed and compete against free speech on a fair playground. But this feels like it's turned into a rant, so let's move on. Let's go through the video game news. Since there's not a lot, we'll look at the games that came out over the weekend. Here we have one called Mambo Wave, which looks like it's a side-scrolling, moving a little too fast platforming game. Kind of feels like a student project that's not quite polished. But yeah, that side-scrolling seems really fast. It seems like you're controlling things with the mouse too, which would be annoying. The $1.39 English only. Yep. There definitely were a lot of games in the old days that were like that, where you are very much not likely to have quite the right balance, and so then it just plays awkwardly. Here we have a game called Technedia, which looks like it is just some asset flip neon textures of some sort. It seems like it's jumping and parkouring. They're calling it a platformer action VR arcade game for $9.99 English only. And that just does not visually look good. I suppose on Shadowverse all we're trying to do here is get a quick disconnect. Here we have a game called Bigfoot Forest, and you can see the visuals here are stretched completely to the wrong scale. And otherwise it looks like a dark screenshot asset flip game, first person shooter, 84 cents English only. Yep. Just burn through these really quickly if we can. Here we have a game called Cold Winter, which seems to be probably a asset flip survival game, which with some dark screenshots too. 84 cents, English only. Just, well, yeah, I suppose if we're just gonna burn through all the non-impressive things in one fell swoop, that might work fairly well. Okay. Hit that. And then hit that. And then end the turn, I guess. Next, we have a game called Critters for Sale Snake, which apparently is a creepy black and white visual novel horror game. We're calling it a point and click visual novel. See, now, like this art aesthetic here that's being shown might be something, and having the background and having an effect over everything does add a feel of more visuality to everything. Game seems weird, and in the aspect of a horror game, weird almost works, but I'm not sure it quite does here. Like, I feel like this might be somewhat of just too crazy of a game. It's free to play, and it's a demo for something just called Critters for Sale, English only. So I guess the best thing to do would be to come over here, and we'll just put that on the follow list, even though it's not out yet. And yeah, I am not sure I really trust this game. What I want to do is go back home, and let's see if we can possibly play some rotation instead for Bloodcraft and Polocraft. The weirder a game gets, the higher the chance that there's going to actually be something there that is worth even looking at. So when we have a game like this called Bacon Rebellion, where you are running around in a top-down twin-stick shooter fighting pigs that are shooting at you, that's weird. I feel like there have been other games where it's similarly the same concept of pigs attacking you. I think maybe it's just a funny concept, or possibly it's the same person making the same kind of game over and over again, and we can test that in a second. This is $2.79, English only. I think it does deserve a follow, but apparently I may be logged out. Let me see. Nope. So yeah, I'll put it on the follow list, and we'll see what the user reviews happen. It definitely has some things going against it in the fact that it is just a top-down twin-stick shooter game, and it doesn't feel like you're going to go very far in different locations or do anything crazy. But then it does have some nice visual polish here, so it might be a experience that is worth about 5 hours of fun. If we look at the other games this developer's made, we have their first game being mixed, their second game being mostly positive, their third game being mostly positive. So that's good news. It's kind of ridiculous to hold their first game against them like that. And they've released like 3 games in 3 years, and then they've waited until 4 years later to release their next game, which I think may be an indication that they learned it was better to do quality instead of quantity. And that certainly is a nice message that you would hope a lot of game developers would hear and take to heart. But a certain level, I don't know what you say or do there to make that happen. Like, because for every one company that does decide to change their flooding of Steam ways, you're going to have 100, if not 1,000, other developers that are going to consistently still stick with it. It's almost like running a high school or middle school. Probably a middle school would probably be a better indication, because high school kids tend to have already mostly learned how to behave. You inevitably, if you were the principal of a middle school, you would have every year the same old instances happening, the same old problems, the same old bad actors that need to learn not to be bad actors. And the only way I think pretty much anybody's ever figured out to deal with that is just to have the rules become very exhaustive and very draconian. Often they don't have to be a draconian, but they do have to be exhaustive, in the sense that you have to say, look, we've had this before, we know this scenario, we've caught other people doing bullying, we've caught other people doing drugs, we've caught other people stealing, we know all the tricks, so you're not going to get away with anything. So don't even try. That's pretty much, I think, the best scenario that Steam could become, is that they could give an exhaustive, like, video class you can't skip to anyone who lists the game on Steam. Like, with your $100 to list a game, take up 100 hours, $100 worth of time, which, let's see, at least at minimum wage, if you required somebody to do 16-20 hours of education, like here's some reading, here's some examples, here's some things, particularly if you can make that education actually feel like it is not just wasting people's time, even though it really would just be there to waste people's time. That probably would work very nicely. YouTube kind of does something like that with the content ID or guideline strikes, in that you have to go through this whole class and you have to answer questions, and it's super annoying, particularly considering how almost 100% of anybody who gets a community guideline strike feels like it's unjust, and I would say almost 50 to 60% of people who get community guideline strikes, it is unjust on YouTube. But there certainly is a logic to it. Yeah. Particularly if the people that are flooding Steam with terrible games are taking up 80-90% of all the moderators' times, which is, I assume, probably the case.
Check this out.
That and then that, I guess.
Gone and mucked things up.
Moving on, we have a game on Steam here called A Crooked Heart, where you're playing as kind of this dog, corgi, that is interacting in some way with these giant monstrous characters. You got a lot of backgrounds here, and it kind of feels like you're playing as a corgi in a horror point and click, which there might be an idea to that. But when you look at the actual trailer, it seems like he's running and he's platforming, and he has this like shooting ability, which really just kind of feels inconsistent in a lot of ways. It doesn't fully make sense. It's claiming to be traditionally animated, which that's nice and all, but that doesn't sell your game. It's $4.99. It claims to have been rated by the ESRB. I doubt that to be true. I'm gonna put this on the follow list, but it kind of feels like you're playing a Metroid game here. Like that somebody really loved Metroid, Super Metroid, decided to make a game, but then they decided to have the main character be a dog, which it's a weird choice. Like, as much as I like corgis, I don't generally want to play as one. But yeah. I guess all I can do is put a game like that on the follow list and we'll see. Gamasutra updated their post that Twitch and Discord have suspended Trump-related accounts. This was a post updated 1/8. They banned the Donald Discord server, which arguably both Twitch and Discord have kind of stopped being video game only platforms. So like it's kind of stops being video game news at that point. Like Twitch, with its focus on just chatting and other categories like that, have kind of stopped being about video games uniquely. And honestly, when's the last time we've even heard any story around Twitch that was really about a video game streamer doing something interesting in video game? We don't even get like the Games Done Quick announcements and things like that highlighted anymore from Twitch. The only time we hear about any game streamer on Twitch is because they've done something not gaming related to cause controversy. Moving on, OpenCritic has an article. Tetris 99 is getting a Kirby Cup with rewards from Kirby Fighters 2. If people are still playing Tetris 99, I'm sure they'll be slightly excited by that. Okay. But I can't evolve. And I can't kill this thing. I don't know what to do then. So just end the turn. Next we have a game on Steam here called Lone Wolf World War II. This is funny because it's a skewed shoot 'em up game. And you don't see a lot of those. I feel like I maybe have seen 2 or 3 other games where it had this perspective, and it's not particularly easy to draw things at a skewed perspective. It probably shows them visually a little bit better if you do it that way. The buildings, for instance, gives you a bit of 3D dimensionality to it. This is $4.99. English allegedly full audio. That's nothing there that I'd want to play.
How are you? I'm so excited.
About to lose.
I lost. You're tough.
TechRaptor has an article here. Phasmophobia beta update makes ghosts better hunters. If you're interested in that, you can read that article. I don't care about Phasmophobia as it's a multiplayer game, so I'm not gonna mess with that. Here we could try and get rid of this Portal Craft deck. Let's see, this one, this one, this one, this one, this one. Is this all about puppets? Yes, this is. So if I come over to just Eternal and then type in Puppet, we have one card that works there, and then otherwise we should just think. Take that because it's big. We can do 3 of those. And that was more than enough. Then I guess the question should be, do we want to try to put something else in instead? See, this was a real deck that was mostly built around having decent cards. Although it doesn't really make sense why I have that card when I don't have its companion. Take one of those. Take one of those, I guess. See, the problem with this is I just inherently don't care enough about Shadowverse, and that I've yet to find a way to care enough about Shadowverse. So spending even 5 minutes there going through a deck and trying to look at the cards, the interface is not the way I would like it to be, certainly. They probably should steal some interfaces from Magic the Gathering, and steal some ideas from Hearthstone and Magic the Gathering in general. But also, I just feel like I need more cards and I need more success. Perhaps earlier on I needed more success to be optimized around this. Also, I guess if you just didn't have the daily requirements, as terrible as they are, that would probably be very helpful also. Like, the idea that I would want to come and play this every single day for 3 different rewards is laughable, because I don't even really want to play it every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. See, next we have a game on Steam here called Rydo the Universe, and this looks interestingly animated. Awakened from Dreams. Well, it was interestingly animated, and then it became more chibi-esque animation. Action cinematic 2D RPG. That's what it's tagged as. There's a lot here. In a funny way, this kind of is the type of game that I would say maybe has a bit of Game Boy aesthetic, but actually looks like a modern game enough that I'd actually want to play it. It's coming out in winter, English only. Yeah, it does kind of feel like it's a half Zelda game, half platforming game. A lot of faster action, twin stick type shooting. Well, yep, that does look like an actual game, and it's always nice to see actual games instead of like fake attempts or half-hearted attempts at games, which is what we often see. TechRaptor has an article here: Mass Effect Legendary Edition release date revealed by retailers. So when is the release date? Launching spring of 2021. I guess I'm fairly happy. I don't think I have bought any of Mass Effect for my PC. I think I just had maybe 1 or 2 of the games for Xbox 360.
One step at a time. I can do this.
Although, in all fairness, the idea of me actually going and playing Mass Effect Legendary Edition or otherwise seems unrealistic. Depending on what it really is, like, do they synchronize the control scheme so that Mass Effect 1 plays like Mass Effect 2 to the point where Mass Effect 1 is effectively then being remastered? Do they synchronize the graphics so that's the case also? Let's see. Just gonna put this on the field, then I'm gonna do this.
Will usher in a new age.
And then end the turn. Next we have a game on Steam here called Arnold, which is just a side-scrolling shooter. It doesn't even look like it flows particularly well. It's kind of herky-jerky with its movement. It's early access for $5.39, which is way too expensive. 5 cheaply animated achievements. Next, we have a game on Steam called Tank XY, which looks like it is nothing. They're calling it a simulation sports strategy game. To me, it looks like it's probably just an asset flip of some kind of programming interface that they are trying to resell, or just a terrible game in general. $7.99 English only. Yep. If Steam did require people to go through any kind of training before listing a game on Steam, you could also certainly have an experience where if somebody failed the same test over and over again and they gave the wrong answers for the first try, because almost certainly it would be like, read this paragraph and then answer this multiple choice question, and then anybody who gets the multiple choice question wrong the first time would then be going, no, that's wrong. And then if they got it wrong like the second time, if there's 4 options and it takes them 4 tries to guess the right answer, you probably at that point know you can put a score on that publisher and say, all right, let's keep an eye on the listings of this this publisher, and then when you see something terrible, way worse than even Tan XY, it's Tan, it's not Tank, TAN XY, as like a tangent. Like you could keep an eye on certain publishers and say, all right, let's see what kind of game they actually list. Also, you could probably automate a delay too and say, okay, you failed this test, therefore you cannot list a game on Steam for 6 weeks. Like, if you totally don't answer on the right answer, then you can't do it in 6 weeks. If you do answer right, then you can list a game in 2 weeks. Just put a even minimal delay there. Of course, is that any of that really going to stop the full money laundering organizations that we heavily suspect exist on Steam? No, because they would just get the answers and hand them over to everybody. There would be obviously some cheat sheets or a way to even automate it, but you could certainly fight against that. I don't even know if there's a CAPTCHA system. That's how bad Steam Direct may be. I don't know. I haven't looked at it myself, but I wouldn't be surprised if it kind of is lacking even a CAPTCHA system. Okay. Let's do this here, 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 here.
Activating system interface subroutine.
That, that, and that. Hmm. 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 Just end the turn there. Moving on, we have a Gamma Sutra article. Iron Source has acquired ad insight platform Somla. I don't know either one of these companies. So, they certainly are not forward-facing companies. Here we have a game on Steam called Sakura MMO Extra, which we're getting some side boob there. Visual novel romance simulation game, but no actual sexual content being listed here. So that this being listed on a Monday might indicate that they're getting a little bit deeper in what games get suppressed and what games don't as far as their release date. This is $7.49. It's from Wing Cloud Bundle. It's English and Chinese. And I don't know if there's a real reason to put this on the follow list, but it's nicely animated, and it could be that it became overwhelmingly positive. So I think it deserves at least a chance there. Let's see. See if we can change this Bloodcraft game. Come on, where are you? Click on this. There's a card here. And card here. And a card here. And then come over here. And that. And that. And then that, I guess. That's as much as I want to change. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Best Fiends publisher Playtika launches a 1.6 billion IPO. I do realize I'm saying again, and I'm hearing it myself, but I just I'm a little too sleepy today to even try and correct that. There is definitely an argument for consistency if I'm ever going to actually train myself from saying as much as I do, but there is kind of also a negative feedback loop in my subconscious every time I beat myself up about it also. So sometimes you may just need to take the day off. Well, or maybe it just never gets fixed and I'm just not miserable because of it. At a certain point, it may just come down to acceptance. Moving on, we have a Square Enix trademarks Ever Crisis, The Last Soldier, and other Final Fantasy VII names, which does make it feel like maybe there will be more Final Fantasy content, which certainly that makes sense because they may have plans for a big push around the Final Fantasy VII remake, or it could be a case that they are going to do a book or anime, direct-to-DVD anime based on some side characters of Final Fantasy as cross promotion. The bigger fear certainly would be that Final Fantasy VII, already being split into at least 2 parts, is actually planning on being split into multiple parts. So, yeah, that would be irritating, certainly, if it turns out that there was more that was going to happen there. Get that. This is one of these stories that actually comes from Gamatsu, so there was no real reason for me to look at it being repeated by this developer. And it points out, and you usually don't get a lot of confirmation of this, but it definitely points out that Gamatsu is a first-party source for a lot of news, whereas so many other news sites are second, third-hand sources of news, and they just repeat what other people said, and they don't actually do any actual journalism, which makes them fairly useless.
Let's have a sweet time. Go! Go! What a banquet. Tasty. Hands up! Blueprints!
Must become a demon to kill a demon.
Moving on, we have 2020 Tech Raptor Awards Best Writing Award. It seems like they are very slowly putting out their Game of the Year 2020 awards, which maybe that works better, frankly, because doesn't that then inherently let you just once every Monday, once a week, talk about the 5 or 6 aspects of games that people are interested in? Like, if I was going to do something like that, you could certainly have best music, best writing, best animation, best story, best controls, best interaction, maybe best QuickTime events, best scripted scenes, compared to full free interactive scenes.
Check out my fancy footwork. Get ready to fly.
My stomach.
You might even go a bit crazier, and you might go best trailer. If you wanted to highlight trailers, I think that's fairly crazy. And if you were going to highlight best trailer, you could also certainly have like best trailer music, best trailer animation, best trailer gameplay. Maybe you could promote better trailers that way if you had enough influence. But I'm not sure that that's really super believable. So they've given a Reader's Choice to Last of Us Part 2. They've given 3rd place to Cyberpunk 2077. 2nd place to Last of Us Part 2. And winner is Hades. And that definitely once again just shows that either a lot of Tech Raptors audience liked Last of Us Part 2, or they just did not play Yakuza Like a Dragon or Ghost of Tsushima. And I wouldn't be surprised if it is more of a case that Tech Raptor audience really just haven't played those games. Also could be a case of just astroturfing. I've been wasting a lot of time watching a YouTube channel called Comic Pop, and they have like several videos that are 5, 6, 7 years old, just recapping what happens in the Marvel and DC comic book, mostly events, not individual issues, is what they're recapping. And every single event, every crisis, every event that happens in Marvel, every reboot is just as awful as the one before, as the one less. But one of the things that led me to was the thought that's being thrown out there of comic creators now starting to jump into really, really small forums or have someone pretend to be them, potentially. Like they're coming into really small forums, like chat rooms, and giving some interaction on the trade that it's all positivity. So they're trying to astroturf, they're trying to just promote positively always and nothing but positivity. Which, yeah, that certainly can start to skew your reviews. And the idea that you would try to create a scenario where your reviews are always positive creates a bad precedent, because if you're never getting any negative feedback, or if you're completely closed off to negative feedback, your experiences, you're never going to improve as an artist and creator. And certainly that feels like that's the case for the creators of Last of Us Part 2, or at least some of the creators of Last of Us Part 2, that they are just not open to feedback, therefore they almost certainly won't make a better Last of Us Part 3 if they're even allowed to make Last of Us Part 3. Although I suppose it would be kind of hard to... Nah, it'd be super easy to make a Part 3. You just don't have the same people. It was never labeled as the Ellie game. It was always called Last of Us. And Joel was the main character, really, or at least half of the main characters in the first game. So, yeah. Moving on, we have a Gamma Sutra article. Riot and Bungie have filed a lawsuit against Destiny 2 and Valorant cheat maker. So they're suing somebody who made a cheat. Yeah, we are seeing several instances of this. Also, just in case we don't have this article, it seems like several fan games have been taken down, fan ROMs, through DMCA, in the name of Nintendo. Questionable. It's slightly questionable whether it actually is Nintendo telling this corporation to represent them to take down these ROMs. Like, it would be very easy to just assume that it's Nintendo's fault, but it would also be very easy to pretend you're Nintendo and take down fan ROMs. And I don't know if there's really a reason why you would want to take down fan ROMs otherwise, unless you're just completely being a anarchist, because it's hardly like the fan ROMs are going to usurp the first market or confuse people. Like, you're talking ROMs that were on ROM sites that an average purchaser of video games wouldn't even know about, let alone know how to get an emulator running. Moving on, we have a TechRaptor article. Genshin Impact story quest about Ganyu is coming tomorrow. I suppose that's what that's supposed to say. Wow, they missed 2 whole letters in the title. Alright, yeah. I don't know if anybody's really still playing Genshin Impact, or if at this point it is just kind of beating a half-dead horse, because there's just not a lot of other things to talk about. Let's see. We can do this here, or we can do this, which I think we're safe if we do this. Yeah, we're safe.
Do
for this turn. Next, we have a game on Steam here called My Last Memories of You, which seems like it is a walking simulator slash puzzle game that looks a lot like The Witness, to the point where I almost thought, oh, is this a early release of a sequel to The Witness? But no, I think what it is it's probably just slightly low polygon asset flips to make a walking simulator that might be decent enough to play. You're finding photos, there's numbers on the back of the photos. It's tagged as story rich. $3.99 English full audio. They are comparing it to The Witness, and yeah, the graphics in The Witness are slightly different and slightly better, and they're comparing it to Real Mist. So the fact that it says it's a short story is a little scary, definitely, and that is a point here where I feel like you are going to have to be careful and look at user reviews before you play a game like this. Alright. Let's see. This.
Welcome to the city of hopes and dreams.
And then go ahead and evolve this.
Coming at you.
Welcome to the city of nightmares
And do that.
Do it
And
for
then
her.
hit that. I watched a movie over the weekend called Coherence on Amazon Prime, where basically it's only a slight spoiler to say that a comet flies over and then it creates a scenario where people can cross over to different alternate realities, and they are confused, to say the least, around the fact that there's as to why there are multiple copies of themselves wandering around that are slightly different versions, and the slightly different versions seem to be potentially a little nefarious or bad guys.
Fitting end.
It as a movie was fine, as kind of like a one room movie, not really any extra sets on top of that. It all takes place in one house and one street next to our house, but it also has some, I would say,
Now the fight begins.
go nowhere storyline.
Do it for her. No!
Accelerator, Compasso.
So, yep.
All shall return to the stars.
I would say watch Coherence if you want to, but don't be surprised when it kind of ends on nothing. One of the things about Amazon Prime in particular is there is a just large collection of garbage that they have allowed to be listed on their platform, where Netflix at least curates things. So there are some pretty awful movies on there. And I don't mean like awful movies like Porky's, which happens to be on Amazon Prime. I mean awful movies like somebody shot this on a handheld camera as a ego-driven project, and it looks awful. It seems to have had no post-production on it at all. There's just no logical reason why this would have ever made it on any kind of streaming platform. Amazon Prime is effectively the Steam of let's see. of movies. Okay. Hit that, and then that.
You are forgiven.
That. Oops. Can't be attacked. Moving on. Apparently Lucasfilm Games isn't a thing again since Disney has bought them out. Let's do something here to make this a little bit more visually interesting. Let's go ahead and just zap all that, and then zap all that, and then zap that. There we go. So yeah, Lucasfilm Games may be new as a title compared to Lucasfilm Entertainment, but other than that, it feels definitely like it's just the same old in a new wrapping. All right, 1, 2. Hit that. Hit that. Hit that. Hit that.
The world cycles on.
In the turn. So they have a new social channels, a sizzle reel, and more herald the bright future of Lucasfilm Games. Seems kind of crazy that they would get back into listing games. Like, and for all we know, this could be, oh, we're gonna have games on Facebook. Or it could be a case that they are specifically just trying to get rid of they were trying to get rid of the old people in charge of the games department of Disney, because like this is an EA game being listed first, Galaxy of Heroes, the Old Republic, Knights of the Eternal Throne. Like, I assume this is new content. That's another EA game for The Sims, or just content for The Sims. Battlefront 2. This very well may be a case that they've simply negotiated that all Lucasfilm games should come under the brand of Lucasfilms, because here you have the Telltale game being under that brand too, Jedi Fallen Order being under that brand. So this really seems like this is just a rebranding effort to say we're going to have all of them together and connected, saying in part that every game in the every Star Wars game is going to be at least partially implied to be in the same canon, that they're not going to have a completely non-canonical experience. This. That.
Blow on, dear wind.
What you're not seeing there, of course, is any announcements of new games or any announcement of a intention to create new games or an intention to go in any kind of different direction. It feels like what they're saying more is that they had nothing better to do, which is, in all honesty, Disney at the moment probably has very little to do. Production is probably very slow for anything that's going to show up on Disney Plus. They are probably going to be heavily disappointed by WandaVision when that shows up on Disney Plus. Their whole Marvel concept, it's a little surprising there isn't more of a Marvel games listing than a Lucasfilm Games, and the difference there is that they had more negotiating power. No, Disney owns Marvel too, so maybe they're experimenting with the games no more as as something that will become more standard. Use play points equal to summon them. Can I do that?
Here goes into the blue and beyond.
See, was that supposed to summon 2? Oh, this gives Grand's Resolve a Jajit's Determination, but instead it summons a different card. Okay. And what else do we want to do? Can we do anything?
Ooh, you're a big fella.
9, 14 points.
I like, give me that. I like, give me that. I like, give me that.
I envy you.
Apparently that card could attack more than once without actually reading it.
Seems to be over.
I wouldn't directly say that every big company should be doubling down on developing more games as compared to anything else. But it probably is the case that big companies should double down towards just polishing and developing whatever they're working on for a while. Like, that way, if movies ever get back into the theater, which is, I suppose, an if more than a when, the movies that do come out are going to be really great, but then they might also be so expensive because they double down on the development there, they may still not succeed. They may actually fail instead of just Hollywood accounting making them fail. Same is true for games. Somebody could double down and make a really great game, but are we going to guarantee twice as many sales if somebody spends twice the amount of time? Maybe, maybe not. It could very well be that there's a whole different market for games out there. There could be a lot of people right now that are bored at home that are older and playing video games for their first time. So it is possible that really, really great games could sell twice as much, but the market research and analysis for that is pretty much just speculation. But I mean, I think at a certain point, that's all you can do. Either you stay in business and you keep working on what you're working on, or you start some side projects and you experiment. Maybe side projects and experiments are a better idea there. It would be very interesting if Lucasfilm Games gave several teams a year just to do whatever they wanted to, and it created several interesting experimental games. We've seen Double Fine do that to some moderate success. Particularly if they're just making like pitches and then the pitches get greenlit into actual games. The inherent impulse, I think, of a company like Disney is that they're gonna either try to batten down the hatches and just lose the least amount of money, or they're going to try to sell off, and they're in a situation at the moment where trying to sell off doesn't work. So I'm not sure what Disney can really do to save itself if it actually is in danger, other than potentially just lay off people and sell off. Yeah, And frankly, maybe Disney should just collapse under its own weight. Maybe the house of cards of the economy finally should just topple for a lot of big corporations and small corporations and middle corporations, because all it took was one huge pandemic to stop people for even a second from going out and spending money that they didn't absolutely need to spend. And like, we may very possibly have a depression in the eyes of corporations and a realization revival in the eyes of consumers, because they may realize that, oh, I'm actually better off now at a certain point because I'm not spending money and just living my life at home doing very little. Of course, all of capitalism in the United States has been built around brainwashing people from birth to think that they are unhappy if they're not consuming. And that is certainly a level of brainwashing that has to be broken. And there are plenty of instances in which someone who gets outside of that brainwashing and decides just to live a simple life, that person is always depicted as being a little crazy or completely crazy, and it being unreasonable or unattainable. Okay. If I do this, I'll just be at 9, so I shouldn't play a puppet. Moving on, we have a blog here, COVID-19, Unity and I, the postmortem on Chestnut Grove. So this is a game somebody made where it's set in the pandemic. It was made during the pandemic, and it kind of just looks like an asset flip game. Certainly not a game I think anybody really wants to play. It's on itch.io, which also certainly points out that they didn't even bother to list it on Steam. Like, I don't think anybody wants to be reminded of that, and I don't think that's a great experience to have. Frankly, if you want to set something in a pandemic-like environment, you could easily just have a zombie apocalypse, and it would just be like every other zombie apocalypse game. Or you could have just a generic disease. There's no real reason why you would want to limit it down to, for at least video game purposes, a boring pandemic like COVID-19. You probably would want to make it much more infective or lethal. Like, take it to the extremes, because that's what fiction tends to do, is take games to the extremes.
Continue to believe.
+1 to an allied card and then draw. No, that would have been all allied followers. Oops. Moving on, we have a TechRaptor article. System Shock 2 Enhanced Edition is now also a VR title. Which we have seen a lot of changes around the remake of System Shock 1, which is one company, and then the re-release of System Shock 2 and Remaster, which is Night Dive. I think they remastered System Shock 1 also, which has really just confused the issue. It definitely feels like what happened with System Shock is that somebody ran out of money and they decided to sell the rights for multiple different types of games to multiple different people all at the same time, thus inherently flooding the market in a way that is probably not going to be a good experience to play all of those games. In all honesty, I almost certainly will just spotlight System Shock in its original form, play the remaster of 2, assuming there is a remaster of 2. I think there is. And no, I'll play the remake and then of System Shock 1, and then play a remake of System Shock 2 if there is one, and I'll skip directly over the remasters. The only time I tend to want to play the remasters of a game is when they are separated by about 5 years, ideally from the original release, and 5 years from any kind of remaster likely coming out. Which I don't know if that's the case in this instance. What do I want to do? Let's do this. And Storm versus Russian Drain versus Bane and Ward. There you go, here. And then we'll evolve this.
Coming at you. Data uplink complete. Eliminating target.
Hit that.
Eliminating target.
Hit that.
Eliminating target.
Hit that.
Eliminating target.
And hit
You're a
that.
solid fighter.
Gamester has an article here. The English translation of Ask Iwata will arrive in April this year. Iwata being the former CEO of Nintendo. Although, honestly, I'm not sure he's got much to say. Like, the Japanese version of this book has been out, I think, for a while, and we haven't heard any major revelations or anything like that. That wouldn't be surprised if there isn't much to say. The CEO of a Japanese company is not going to have major conflicts or major decisions to make. And if we were really just going to think about Iwata's career, you can maybe blame him for the green lighting of the Wii U, but then you have to also reward him for the creation of the Wii. And so his decisions led Nintendo, and in the longer term over that period, you would probably argue Nintendo didn't do the greatest of jobs. They were just very conservative, and they got fairly lucky with a lot of success, and they just have a lot of fanboys, of which I used to be one, that would buy anything Nintendo, no matter how bad it might be. At least that was the case up until the Wii U. Next, we have a game on Steam here called 100 Hidden Cupcakes, which is just a black and white hidden thing. Honestly, this just feels like somebody scanned an image. I wouldn't be surprised if we start to see, or if it has already been going on, people making digital versions of games like this and then printing them out and selling book versions of it too. This is 89 cents. There's a bundle here of $6.15 for 6 different hidden object games. It's English only. On a certain level, though, at least you know what you're getting there. It's not particularly being deceptive. It's not asking a lot of money. So I suppose if you had a young kid and they were a PC gamer and they wanted these things, at a certain point, I think it's silly to give kids PCs unless their friends are playing on PCs, and up until very recently that was not really the case. Now it does feel like we might be entering an era where PC gaming is the default platform for a lot of kids and their friends, because I don't think Among Us is on anything but PC. I don't think Fortnite is best played on anything besides PC. So yeah, there is just a potential there where you very well might want to get a kid a PC. But if you commit them to the PC, you've got to kind of commit them to PC for life. And that's a fairly cruel thing to do to a kid, to say, hey, you're never going to get a console if I get you a PC. Or you've got to get them a fairly cheap PC, which is probably the better move there. is to just say, all right, we'll get you a PC, but it's going to be a $500 to $600 PC. It's not going to have the greatest game graphics. It's not going to have anything great there. Don't do what previous generations have done and say, oh, this will be good for schoolwork, because in all honesty, it won't. They may have to use a PC or a laptop for zooming, but yeah, that's.
You have summoned the blade of purgation here.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else to really say there. It's just, it would be certainly weird. I've never felt like there's been a point up until this point where you might legitimately get a kid a PC, a young kid, like a 6, 7, 8-year-old, 10-year-olds PCs. I could see getting a 12, 13, 14-year-old a PC and then being responsible, but enough for it. But up until this point, I would have definitely said get a Switch. Moving on, we have a TechRaptor article. A fan game, I believe, called Return to Castle Monkey Ball combines Wolfenstein and Monkey Ball, which is a funny idea, but it's kind of nothing. It's just like taking the visual assets, mostly of Wolfenstein, and the gameplay mechanic of Monkey Ball. Like, in the original Monkey Ball game, doesn't really make a ton of sense. And the 3D visuals and the way things are animated in Wolfenstein to begin with is likely to make some people motion sick, so adding Monkey Ball to it is only going to make it worse. This is another itch.io game, which we've I'm a little surprised about that. That there is no. Sorry, lost my trail of thought again there. Yeah, I kind of had felt like itch.io had been mostly abandoned, but maybe it's making a bit of a revival. Here we have a Gematsu article. Hitman 3 reveals all 6 locations. So there's Dubai, there's Dartmoor, there's Berlin, there's Chongqing, and Mendoza, Carpathian Mountains. Okay. There is a point, certainly, to point out, I think, around the fact that Hitman 3 only has 6 locations. That seems lacking compared to the way Hitman games used to be, where they were more linear and you would have more missions. And in all fairness, maybe it's 6 locations, and in each of the location there's 10 missions to do, but they kind of have, I think, stopped really going for quantity and instead are really pushing quality, and that is very much going to be subjective as far as whether you thought the Hitman reboot was good enough for the amount of content it gave you, particularly if you're going to go back and play the Hitman 1 reboot now, when all of the games as service content is less likely to be included. And then you would have to make the same decision for Hitman 2. Gamma Sutra has a blog here, how studios can prevent unauthorized spending in games. The easiest way would simply be don't have any authorized spending at all. But I guess the real question is, how do you stop kids from using their parents' credit cards, and how do you stop people from stealing credit cards? And there probably isn't major ways that a game company can do that compared to just a Bank could do that. There could be certainly an initial setup whenever you install an app that says, hey, give us a secondary password when you want to do in-app purchases. But most game developers would not embrace that idea by any means.
Are you as excited as I am? I'm so excited!
Let's see. TechRaptor has an article here. A Pulse Red Xbox controller hits China tomorrow, world on Friday. Okay. Not sure that if I ever get to an Xbox One controller, which I guess are just being called Xbox controllers, like, I'm not sure if I'm gonna fully like the triggers. I guess I'm still playing with Xbox 360 controllers. Maybe. Like, I have a back button, but I don't have an upload share button. So, I don't know where I really stopped there. And I guess I am just waiting for a new controller to be on sale. And they very likely will never be on sale. And the problem certainly with Xbox controllers more than any other controller is that they don't wear out that much, and they haven't iterated that much compared to the PlayStation controller, so it still makes a lot of sense to not upgrade if you don't have to upgrade. It is also, I think, worth mentioning, in my opinion, red and white are bad colors for a controller, because I don't want to be visually distracted by a controller that is in the lower periphery because I'm holding it in my hands. And I very much prefer as black a controller as I can get. I don't need the button prompts, and they can be written in black on black anyways. I don't think there's any way to remove the colorful button prompts that I have. I guess the colorful button prompts might also indicate it's still a 360 controller that I'm playing with. Even though there definitely have been some games that have said that I was playing on an Xbox One controller. I don't think that the API that Windows provides makes a difference there. Moving on, we have a game called Disjunction launching January 28th, according to Gamatsu.
I lost.
Which, let's see what this is. Top-down twin stick shooter. Might be a little bit more of a stealth experience. There actually might be a game here, because this feels like it has story, and it has some characters, and maybe that's just a tutorial mode. Feels more like a stealth top-down twin stick shooter than just a standard it's gonna be action all the time twin stick shooter. Still trying to get one victory, and definitely we are recognizing that I missed several days of daily quest I could have done. Gamma Sutra has an article here. Justin Rowland, which is a name I recognize, but I don't know from what, is going to be Squanch Games CEO following the departure of Tanya Watson. Now, the only game that they've made, I think, is Trover Saves the Universe, which was such a weird game anyways. It felt like even weird for the Rick and Morty crowd. And frankly, a game versus a 30-minute experience is a different beast. See, the outgoing chief exec will be replaced by the studio co-founder and current chief creative officer Justin Rowland, who many will know as the co-creator and voice actor supremo between Rick and Morty. Now, at a certain point, you're in this weird position where it could be that Justin Roiland is just horribly inefficient, and that's why Rick and Morty gets released in a super slow way, or it could just be that Adult Swim's not willing to hire and pay slave labor wages to have people animate things faster. Like Justin Roiland, I believe, has directly said it's the animators that they're just taking. They take a while to animate the cartoon, which, if that was the case, that kind of doesn't hold water in a VR game. So why has there not been another Squanch game announced or released since Trover Saves the Universe? And I imagine what is going to happen here is that the company is going to mostly just exist and never create another piece of content. Can't evolve this, so I should just play this.
You're a big fella.
To die or not to die.
Alright. See, Watson co-founded Squanch alongside Roland in August of 2016 and has overseen the launch of 3 VR titles, including Accounting, Dr. Sporky Presents Space Heroes, haven't even heard of that game, and Trover Saves the Universe. Although she intends to stay on at the studio's advisor, Watson said that the fact that Squanch just experienced its most successful year to date convinced her it's time to leave and build something new. That's like the weirdest statement ever, to hide the fact that she's being either forced out or she wants to leave because the ship is sinking. Take your pick. Like that. That is kind of insane.
You're a big fella.
Okay, we'll play this, I guess. Kill that one. It would be interesting to do some research here and see how many employees exist. See if LinkedIn will tell us how many employees. Not without me signing in. Let's see. Squanch Games doesn't even have a Wikipedia listing. Alright, well. Here we go. Can we evolve this now? One, 2, 3.
My stomach.
Okay. So here's Squanch Games and their team. They have Justin Roiland, Tanya Watson, both listed as CEO at the moment. We have Mikey Spano, Eric Meyer, Colby Wall, Desmond Rogers, John Buchman, JD Craig, Mike Friedley, Amy Achille, Rihanna Ballog, Mike Casanova. We have narrative designer Zoe Morgan, Sean McNally, Nick Wise, Steve Cha, senior gameplay programmer Dan Wise, William McCall, Samuel Gonzalez, Kaylee McLeary. Let's see. Had to play there. Kyle Leary, Samuel Gonzalez, William McGowl, Dan Wise, and then John Park, Michael Leone, Jose Simbulin, Jay Neck. So you're talking, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 rows of 4. So 28 employees. That's a fairly large, small team. And I would say kind of a fairly large female group of people. You have a female producer, a female operations manager, a female narrative designer. But if you're going to say females are 50% of the population and you're going to go by that route, 4 females to 24. 24 is not 50%. But there are also a lot of other reasons that always have to be mentioned as to why females are either given better opportunities or smart enough to not join a small indie developer. And in all fairness, I do feel like a company like Squanch Games would have to work really, really hard to be female friendly, because it's going to be long hours and a lot of work, and that's going to require the special kind of insanity that generally only exists in guys who are workaholics. It is also kind of funny that Justin Rowland here is drawn as this big fat guy with a tiny face, where everybody else has basically just pencil sketch drawings of themselves. Sean McNally, maybe he actually looks like that. Maybe that's more of a caricature. Same with him. A lot of these people seem to be very directly just drawn as normal, as black and white people, instead of extreme caricatures. And so that might be very weird if that's a revelation. I want to do this, and then I want to evolve.
Now the fight begins. Welcome to the city of
And
nightmares
then
and despair.
I want to destroy this. And then, is there really anything left to do? Just kind of play that. And then the turn. So yeah, not a lot of information you can grab around that, other than, you know, one of 4 female employees who was a CEO is leaving Squanch Games amongst their biggest success, which in all fairness, if this is their best success, it's probably going to be their only success. I can't imagine that they really think that they're going to be able to make another VR game, a 4th VR game, looking at just how expensive VR is and the current state of the gaming world. I imagine they may very well have looked at like Half-Life Alyx and said, well, we've seen now what even Valve can do, and even Half-Life Alyx has not gotten the recognition it needed to get, or the sales it needed to get. Forget the recognition. It probably did get the recognition it deserved. It just didn't get the sales it needed to get because people can't afford the headset and the hardware. And this Christmas almost certainly is never going to come out that tons of people bought VR headsets this Christmas. If anything, the story for this Christmas is people bought very, very little, relatively speaking. Particularly things that are extra and unnecessary. Next, we have a game on Steam here called Kinimo Mahjong, which seems like it's just 4-player Mahjong with furry characters, which I don't really get that. it makes a lot more sense if you're going to make a Mahjong game and just kind of asset flip characters in it to use the anime girls. Or at the very least, use anime guys. Then you wouldn't have that much competition. But to stand alone and go for furries with Mahjong, you're mixing two fairly unique audiences there. I've never heard anything that implied that furries were big into Mahjong, or that there was a high level of furries in Japan or Asian countries that wouldn't even know how to play Mahjong. So, yeah, that seems like a prime example of not doing any market research at all. Next, we have a game on Steam called Aircraft Sketch Shooter. There was a, game that I got for free that was based on just hand sketches, and it was early access, and I don't think it ever came out of early access. I think I've done that 2 or 3 times where I've gotten free games that were given away or something, and then they just never actually finished. This game is $5.39 English only, and by the looks of it, it's definitely not worth that price.
My little canary.
Let's see. Well, this next game is not tagged with sexual content, but it kind of looks like it would have sexual content in it. We have a game here called Girl Club, where you're controlling and dancing cat girl, bat girl in a leotard. I don't know what the aesthetic here is, and you've got cleavage here, and that seems to be it, and it seems to just be a rhythm game for 84 cents. English only, 10 achievements that are numbers, and that definitely screams low effort game to me.
My little canary.
See, we have only about 10 more tabs, and I feel like I'm gonna go back to my Twitter feed and see maybe some more news after that point, but maybe not. Tech Raptor has an article here. Loop Hero brings Groundhog Day fun to roguelikes, which this doesn't look particularly interesting since the vast majority of the screen is black. Yeah, this doesn't look like it would catch my interest. It's not animated to my liking. 3 damage to random enemy follower.
To die or not to die.
Let's make sure this one.
To
Yeah, that
die
one's not gonna
or
take
not to
damage.
die.
So. Do this.
An opening and you're toast.
To
And then
die
do that,
or
I guess.
to die.
And then do that. And get rid of that. See, Gamatsu has an article. A game called Monster Tale is coming to modern platforms in 2021. This was a 2011 release DS title. What's funny here is Fear 2 came out in 2009, so there seems to be right around the 2010s era games that are just either owned by companies like WB Games, which is frankly just too stupid to remaster and remake Fear when they could certainly do something with it, or the games are just too old. Like Fear 1 needs a full remake. You could remaster Fear 2 and put controller support into it and it'd still be fine with just better graphics. But then you have definitely a lot of Japanese developers who made a lot of portable titles that want to resell them, and so they're either going to have to remaster them and bring them to either Switch or PC or both. It's a seamless blend of classic gameplay styles of puzzle platformers, Metroidvania, and pet management. Sounds interesting. I don't recall this game though, so wasn't that big, I guess, when I was playing. There is definitely a point, however, where I also just dropped the ball and stopped playing games. Like I won't say a full 10 years, but there was nearly 10 years of at which I just didn't play video games at all.
Welcome to the city of nightmares and despair.
Hit that. And then hit that. But I think I'm mostly caught up from that too. I think I've seen most games that came out in that period. And as I go through like all the games on Steam, I'm not seeing a ton of games that I haven't heard of. If anything, it's more based on genre than release date. Like getting deeper into fighting games or thinking about getting into fighting games. I haven't gotten deep into them at all. I haven't played a single one. If I got into fighting games, would it unlock a good 20, 30 fighting games to consider playing? Getting into visual novels and playing a couple of them has certainly opened my eyes to a lot of possibilities there. Whether or not I actually want to play them or not is questionable. JRPGs, same thing. Where there's plenty of JRPGs I wouldn't have even considered like 10, 15 years ago. Moving on, we have a game on Steam called Dark Canyon, which is just described as a first-person shooting game, and it just looks like a low polygon, kind of low-effort asset flip. It's $11.99, which is way too expensive, English only. Here we have a game just called My Low Poly City, which is a low polygon city. Yep. $3.99, English only. Nothing of interest there. Let's see.
100% string and 0% fluff.
Let's do that.
A spin and a twirl and out.
Then do that. Hit that. And hit that.
Best of luck to you.
And end the turn. Here we have a game on Steam just called Low. We've had quite a large number of just bad games that were released today. Yep. I think we very well may just have that always be the case. This is hard to tell, this game. Like, it could be nothing, or it could be maybe something. Seems like it's kind of a platformer and a shooter. The name is pretty low effort. It's $14.44. It's English and Turkish. I'm going to put this on the follow list just because I'd like to see the reviews on it, but I think we'll very quickly find out that it's not worth it, particularly at that price.
This is where I truly shine.
Alright, and then we can do that, and that, so we can do that. Well, I played completely wrong there. Like, I should have looked and seen what that card did. Here we have a game called Death Off the Cuff, which looks like it's a text-based game. Although, I think this is slightly interesting that you might be able to hover over certain words and maybe get some hyperlinking or just pop-up information. I guess it's pop-up information. $2, English, allegedly full audio. That I think is completely wrong, because full audio in a text-based game would be would be a lot of reading, a lot of voice acting. But yeah, I have no reason why I'd play a text-based game anyway, so even if it was fully audio, it would have to be so good that I'd have to hear about it and somebody would have to review it. Well, this is irritating to say the least, that we cannot manage to get a single victory, and that seems like this is consistently the problem. Here we have a game that's all just Asian characters, and it looks like it's probably mostly text escape the room horror. They're calling it a indie puzzle, and yeah, but I think escape the room horror is probably the closest. It's $3.19. It's Chinese only.
Activate.
Yeah, seems like you just walk around a
Mother, father,
room
one.
and see some spooky stuff maybe, and that's it. Here we have a game called Adventure Bit, which is looks like a, what is that, Commodore game loading from a tape, and looks like a Commodore game in general. Yep, this is $1.19, English, French, and Italian. I don't see anything here of interest. There probably are some Commodore games that are of this level of graphics that I just would never be able to tolerate. The first generation games, I just don't think there's much to say there, like, or much to play there. I did have a funny thought as far as what would I do if I somehow 5-10 years from now have played every single game that has come out in that period and every single game that I intended on catching up. Like, would I just start all over again and play the games the second time, which at that level I'd almost certainly have forgotten everything I'd played, or do I or do I just say, well, job well done, you've played every game that exists on the planet that interests you? Do you at that point get desperate and start playing more things that don't interest you, or do you, like, do you hope or just slow down, or what? The good news is it almost certainly will never happen. There will just always be enough games out there. I have like 2,000 games on my wish list. I'm not going to be able to play 2,000 games in the next 5 years, 10 years, probably in my lifetime. I wouldn't be surprised. And certainly I could find other distractions to, if I started to get a little low, instead of playing games. And I guess in all fairness, I've been playing video games almost my entire life, and I have yet to come anywhere close to running out so far.
Do it for her.
If anything, my standards and my options
Of course I do.
have improved so that I'm playing less bad games. Anyways, moving on, we have a game on Steam here called Acolyte Prologue, which is obviously a demo. It says it has natural language input, and you seem to be talking to like robot acolytes. Is this a real game though? Narrative detective puzzle game.
I've seen them.
So you talk to this robot and it somewhat helps you, while not completely helping you win at the game immediately, and you can customize the way they look. That is probably an idea that should have been in Cyberpunk 2077. This game is coming out in 2021, the actual game, and so it would make more sense to just put that on the fall list and ignore the demo. Okay. Do that. And that. Hit that. And hit that.
Good luck.
Next, we have a game on Steam called Countdown, which is an asymmetric multiplayer game, which means I'm never going to play it. It, to me, looks like it might very well be Among Us if you were trying to remake Among Us in 3D. $8.99 English only. It doesn't look particularly good, and it does look like it is just stealing Among Us's concept. Which, if it was such a great concept, then why not have stole it? Why not steal it earlier than you did? Yeah, inherently that is the weirdness around Among Us, is that it's not like it's a good gameplay concept. It's just a game that caught on with the kids, and so the fact that it caught on with the kids is the reason it's being copied now.
Blow on, dear wind.
Got just a few more tabs.
Foul forces of darkness.
Here we have something called Content Creators Internet Archive, which just looks like it's an RPG Maker game. And looks like it's nothing. I didn't even look at the price. Man, I should do that more often, frankly. If it's just garbage game, I should say, hey, let's not look at the price. Let's not look at the languages. Let's just move forward. Like this Neon Parkour. Do I really need to scroll down and see its early access and it's $1.29, or that it has 100 achievements and claims to support every single language it can think of in full audio? No, that gives us, not really, that gives us a bit of information about the creator, and perhaps at a certain point I might see Aquila Studios publish something else and go, oh, I know this publisher, but that's only if I'm paying attention. If I'm not paying attention, then that means nothing to me. Let's see, do that. Then do that.
Blow on, dear wind.
And do I want to do 1 damage to this guy? I think it's probably wise to do that.
Foul forces of darkness, bow before my tempest.
Yeah, the only real news, frankly, at all today was that the Awesome Games Done Quick 2021 raised $2.75 million for charity, which this charity was the Prevent Cancer Fund. They were mostly doing it broadcast. I saw it coming up on YouTube later, but apparently it was on Twitch, which honestly, Twitch should be celebrating that and promoting that a lot, and they just didn't. Not even really any new runs that are worth mentioning, per se. Like, the problem with the speedrunning marathons for me in particular is that I've just seen it all before. So I just don't feel like they're digging deep enough to weirder or newer games, or just trying to do something. I think at a certain point they need to have a block of at least 4 to 8 hours overnight, one night of just playing a game. Like, straight up, we don't know how to speedrun this game. We will try to find a way to speedrun this game, but mostly all we're going to do is, see, this still lasts till the 31st. That's quite a ways away. But yeah, they need to throw in some games that don't really have many speedrun strats or any speedrun strats, just so they can keep it interesting. Let's see. And that brings me to the Humble Bundle. Is there any new game bundles? No. No new game bundles. So then that brings me back to Twitter. We have another bad game that was released 25 minutes. Twitch an hour ago said they're investigating an issue causing Twitch features to fail, including chat and payment services. 26 minutes ago, they said they've fixed that issue. Let's see, we got an article there. Seems like there was a PlayStation announcement of some sort. Scrolling down here, scrolling down my Twitter feed to see if there's anything new. CES happened, but as far as consumer electronics, there's really not a lot the new TV or anything can do to integrate with gaming and consoles or new monitors. There really is that kind of a I did see that there was like new technology for something that is like a half ink screen by TCL, and TCL might be moving away from Roku TVs into Google TVs. They're probably trying a little bit of both, but I highly suspect we're going to have any new products out of CES that say, hey, get this this 9.2 surround sound, or get this 16K monitor, or anything along those lines, because that'd be fairly insane. The only like electronic gadget I've even thought about recently was there was a special camera that they had, and it came out, but it was just way too expensive, and I've seen no improvement on that technology since then. The camera had kind of like an infinite depth of field because it used a prism to get each ray of light from like each pixel from 3 different angles or something like that, so you could do all kinds of post adjustment. And it was a fairly small type handheld camera that basically made raw images. And I would have liked to see that technology improved. I would have liked to see that technology potentially integrated in the phones, but it kind of just disappeared. I don't feel like there's, frankly, any new content, any new devices of any interest, which, in all fairness, yeah, in my mind, CS died maybe 5 years ago. They're just, the idea of new gadgets and them being important or useful has completely stopped. If you made a new Blu-ray format where with like 16K discs, it would almost certainly be backward compatible. If you make a new router that uses Wi-Fi 6, that's not going to be very interesting to most people. Everything is just going to be an iterative improvement until we get to the point of quantum computers. Maybe 10, 15 years down the line, we'll have CESs where quantum computers are really on sale for personal use, and then maybe there's something interesting there. But until then, I don't think we need any more gadgets. Or at least I don't feel like I need any more gadgets, which is probably to say I already have all the gadgets I need. One thing I'd like is basically magic, though, is if my house was on fire and I needed to grab one thing, I'd almost certainly have to grab my phone, but there's definitely a lot of other things that I'd like to save. So if there was either better fire suppression technology or item compression technology in general. There's a lot of things that would be easier, like, or get away from fires if you just had to move. If you could compress a computer to be smaller, if you can compress TVs to be smaller or non-existent because they're just projected via a phone or a computer itself, that would be interesting. Yeah. For my current setup, my computer would work very nicely if it had a short throw, like upward projector, and it was just projecting on a wall, or if the wall was just painted with a screen. That'd be interesting. Speakers, if you could either paint or stick small stickers on the wall and they become the speakers, that would be interesting. But yeah, all that really is more magic than reality at this point. Anyways, we have this game called Fall Balance Ball, which is just a clone of Super Monkey Ball, for lack of a better description. Does seem to have a slightly different idea in which you have to collect different bits of colors instead of trying to get a high score, but it kind of feels like a mobile game also. 94 cents, English full audio allegedly. Then we have from Komatsu the PlayStation 5 CES 2021 sizzle trailer reveals release windows for Project Athia, game I haven't heard of, Ghostwire Tokyo, which we have heard about that, Kenya Bridge of Spirits, and more. So is this Project Athia or is this Kenya Bridge of Spirits? I think this is probably Ghostwire Tokyo. So maybe this is Kenya Bridge of Spirits. Release windows, let's see. Hitman 3 January, Returnal March 19th, Kenya Bridge of Spirits March, Solar Ash June, Little Devil Inside July, Ghostwire Tokyo, Stray, Ratchet & Clank Rift Apart, Horizon Forbidden West, Project Athia January 2022, and Pragmata is 2023, previously 2022. They have an end card here that says play has no limits. So what do you take from this announcement? There's kind of a lot to take. It's not a Sony Direct, where it felt like Sony was doing that before, and they kind of weren't even trying to make large amounts of announcements. None of these games scream Japan focused, and there's a growing narrative certainly that it feels like the PlayStation 4 didn't sell well enough in Japan to make the Sony of Japan happy, and they handed control over to the US market, and now the US market, through censorship and just not releasing Japanese focused games, is potentially alienating the Japanese market even more. I've heard that you can be rewarded with an extra 20 million sales if you make your game sell well in Japan, which 20 million may not be a big enough number for the US to care about. Kenya Bridge of Spirits and Little Devil Inside, Ghostwire Tokyo, and Project Athia, and maybe Pragmata all sound like they might be interesting to a Japanese market, but I kind of would like to see the trailer itself, and apparently they don't have a video of the trailer up yet. But yeah, it definitely feels weird to go back to CES instead of E3, since E3 was canceled. But it also feels weird still to go back to CES instead of just doing a direct, which implies that they've figured out that Sony Direct announcements are not catching enough people's attention. It's been probably at least 5 years since CES had anything really to do with gaming, so anybody that was at CES is highly unlikely to be in the mentality of caring about games. So it really is just a bad place to have a presentation. Moving on, TechRaptor has a city builder called Far East Frontier has been announced by the Grim Dawn developer, which this seems overly complicated for a game I'd like to play. So I'm not interested in that. Let's see. According to OpenCritic, WB Montreal rebuilt Gotham Knights combat for co-op, which does not sound good to me as somebody who, if I'm going to play Gotham Knights, wants to play it specifically for a single player experience. It also makes me concerned because all the WB games in the past while have either been really bad or they've had like games as service junk thrown into them. And I wonder if making this game for co-op is screaming, oh yeah, we're going to make this a games as service thing. There's going to be microtransactions. We're going to try and get people to play online for a very long time. But maybe not. Maybe they're just trying to make something like Fortnite. That could be the case too. And them specifically making a Batman game without Batman because they killed off Batman, which is I think what they did, does really show that they are kind of lost and they have no idea what to do now. Gamma Sutra has an article here. GameStop says fewer stores and industry-wide decline in supply woes led to holidays sales slide, which, I mean, I can't disagree with them, but GameStop also has a bad reputation that they, like, it should be bad reputation, comma, fewer stores, industry-wide decline in supply woes. And the reason they have fewer stores has more to do with them shutting down stores than them having to shut down stores because the sales were bad. They shut down the stores first and have been for a while. OpenCritic has an article here. The Dying Light narrative designer has left Techland. I think we've already heard about this. Which, yeah, I don't know how much narrative design Dying Light 2 needs, or if it hasn't just all been already done. And finally, we have a TechRaptor article. Lords of the Fallen 2 promises big changes. Which, okay. Like, I don't immediately off the top of my head know what Lords of the Fallen 2 is. But it looks like it might be a fantasy RPG game of some sort. And maybe it needed some big changes. Maybe it didn't. Maybe it's just hyping up big changes because it's going to make big changes regardless. Alright, well, that pretty much wraps up this stream as it is. As always, I ask you to like, share, subscribe, comment, and watch every second of my videos. If you want a friend to follow me on any social media sites, there's a bunch of links down below. And if you want to support me further, there's a link to Patreon, or you can friend me on Steam and get me a game off my wishlist. Thank you for watching. Have a good evening.